Hey, this is World on Fire, and if you're a super fan of the channel, and who isn't, then you might have noticed that I've been gone for a little while. But I'm back, baby. That's right, like adult acne, you can't get rid of me that easy. Here's what happened. After the writer's strike ended, I had to finish up all the freelance contracts that I took on during the strike while also doing my regular job. These bills don't pay themselves, even after I asked them very nicely. Then I got the flu. That's right, not COVID, the flu. I'm old school. Anyway, that really fucked my shit up for a few weeks. And then I had to spend several days driving my big dog across the country, which I actually don't have anything to complain about because she's perfect. Even though on the road trip, she did develop a taste for chicken nuggets and now will not eat her regular dry food, and it's driving me insane. Not to mention all the other people who helped me with this channel also work at The Daily Show, and so when we went back, they had to start doing their jobs, whatever that means. All of which meant that I had to take a little hiatus from this channel right as it was getting started. But it's the new year. I quit most of my freelance jobs, I'm not coughing anymore, at least not on camera, and my dog is safely back in my apartment. In fact, she's right outside the door to this room whining so she can come in and ruin this tape. Like I said, she's perfect. In the meantime, I made some equipment upgrades, I got this white background, and this is true, I was gonna get a haircut, but my stylist also got the flu, which is messed up because the flu is sort of my thing. Also, guys, the flu is out there, it is bad, do not get the flu. Anyway, my plan in 2024 is to hit the ground running and start making a bunch of new videos. I'd love to say that 2024 is gonna be my year, but none of the other years have been my year, so why start now? I recorded the video you're about to watch last year, but because of all that stuff that I just told you about, it wasn't ready to release for a while. So without any further ado, let me take you back to the past. Hey, my name's Nicole, and this is World on Fire, where I read climate news so you don't have to. Let's talk about California, New York's hotter, tanner cousin. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why should I care about California? They don't even have a mayor who's in both the Freemasons and a throuple with a robot. Well, there's the saying, as goes California, so goes the nation. There's this other saying, do one thing a day that scares you, but that's not particularly relevant right now. Basically, California is big and influential, especially because they're the 5th biggest economy in the world. So when California passes a law, a lot of times that'll impact environmental laws and corporate regulations around the country because it's just easier to live by one set of standards than a bunch of different ones, which is why I personally have a few notes for the Bible, but God didn't ask me. A couple weeks ago, California Governor and future Golden Bachelor candidate Gavin Newsom passed some pretty good environmental laws. He also vetoed some other ones that he shouldn't have because he's like obviously trying to become president or whatever, but I mean, who among us hasn't made some mistakes in pursuit of huge corporate campaign donations, right? The first bill he signed is the Climate Corporate Data Accountability Act, which would make corporations tell us how much they're emitting. And this legislation is big because it doesn't just cover the emissions used to make their product or whatever, it also includes everything from operating a building or store to employee business travel to transporting their products to their supply chains and even their customers. Which is probably the first time I've ever heard, hey, a company's tracking your data and been like, oh, awesome. Regulators have until 2025 to figure out the exact rules for how to implement this whole thing, and according to the original text from the bill, the law will go into effect in 2026. 3 years might seem like a long time given the urgency of the climate crisis, but in legislative years, that's like nothing. It's gonna be over before we know it, kind of like Will and Jada's marriage, literally over before Will Smith knew it. Of course, the crybaby corporations don't want to do anything, saying that the bill will create new mandates for companies who don't have the experience or expertise to accurately report their indirect emissions. All right, your company can't just say, we don't know how to do that, so we're not gonna. I mean, who's your CEO, Lucille Bluth?
I don't understand the question, and I won't respond to it.
And some experts believe that these same corporations will gut the bill by removing those emissions reporting requirements. And if you're not going to count indirect emissions from things like employee travel or customers, then what's left? How many farts Doug from HR ripped in his office today? Because it's more than zero. Gavin Newsom didn't just sign the Climate Corporate Data Accountability Act, he also signed the Climate-Related Financial Risk Act, which requires companies worth more than $500 million to disclose the financial risks climate change holds for their businesses, which we should want. If I'm invested in a company that's gonna go underwater, I should know that, especially if the company is based in Miami, because then it might go underwater in 2 ways. And like I said, these disclosure requirements could have benefiting everyone outside of California. The SEC has toyed with the idea of federal legislation that would enact similar policies for public companies, and this California legislation could really help grease the wheels. But not with like fossil fuel grease or animal product grease, Crisco. It could Crisco the wheels. Boy, Language is a minefield. And then to top off all that legislation, Gavin Newsom just visited China to negotiate new climate partnerships, which might seem like a meaningless formality, but it's kind of a big deal. One of the hottest new arguments for why the US doesn't have to act on climate change is that, well, China's not doing enough. And if you want to know why I think that argument is bullshit, Raleigh and I just did a whole podcast episode about it. I'll link it in the show notes. And it's also a big deal because recent tensions between the US and China over like a bunch of stuff have made climate diplomacy a little bit tricky. So Gavin Newsom's visit is kind of feeling out restarting those negotiations. It's like when you get into a huge fight with your significant other, but then out of the blue you receive a text that's like, hey, I'm at the grocery store, do you need anything? And you're like, well, I'm still mad about the size of your military, but we are out of Greek yogurt. No one can get mad at me for that joke because I could be talking about either military. You don't know. Just to be clear, I don't want to give Gavin Newsom too much credit. There are people out there who are like too into Gavin Newsom, and it's like, come on guys, didn't you learn anything from the Cuomo-sexual debacle? Like I mentioned, Gavin Newsom is starting his maneuvers to become president, and that means that no matter what his actual feelings on the climate crisis, he has to look out for his #1 constituents, potential corporate donors. And you're right to raise your eyebrows when Gavin Newsom says that his staff is going to do some cleanup on some little language on those climate bills without specifying his desired changes. Cleaning up a little language could mean anything. I'm a writer, and one time I wrote a beautiful, understated female coming-of-age story, and by the time the execs cleaned up a little language, it was a superhero movie starring Ryan Reynolds as a talking prostate, which I'm still gonna see, by the way. He is very talented. Newsom also vetoed some other environmental bills, including Senate Bill 420, which really feels like that didn't help the situation. You gotta veto Bill 420, otherwise you're the frat governor, you know? I feel like if we ever get to Senate Bill 420, we gotta just skip it like it's the 13th floor in an elevator. Also, at the behest of the California Public Utilities Commission, Gavin Newsom vetoed a couple of proposals to speed up the permitting process for new power lines, which is annoying because if we're gonna up our renewable capacity, we gotta fix our power lines. Trying to run all this new power on our old shitty grid is like trying to move furniture with a skateboard. I've done it before, but it was not reliable and it did break my fridge. If you're keeping meticulous track of state utilities commissions, and I mean, who isn't? I have mine set up like a fantasy baseball grid, then you'll remember that the California Public Utilities Commission also tried to slash incentives for apartment dwellers that wanted to install solar panels, increase natural gas storage at the site of the largest methane leak in U.S. history, and were behind Newsom's veto to require a human driver inside autonomous vehicles, which briefly let robocars drive unfettered all over San Francisco. And it's probably unrelated, but one of the commissioners is a lawyer for Cruise, the autonomous car company, which is a subsidiary of GM, so that's not great. It's probably fine. I'm sure GM doesn't have a long history of using their money to negatively influence public policy. Don't Google it. So bottom line, there is reason to hope that these Senate bills could do some real good for the climate, but we can all see that Gavin Newsom is pretty susceptible to outside forces. Fortunately, we can be those outside forces. So if you're ever hanging out at French Laundry and you spot Gavin Newsom, maybe hide behind a coat rack and throw your voice, be like, everyone at the hedge fund thinks climate policies are super cool, and we only give massive campaign donations to people who follow through on climate promises. Also, we think Gavin Newsom's haircut is very cool and doesn't make him look like a weird supervillain. Or if you think that sounds stupid, you could just try calling his office. If you'd like to get involved with climate action, I put some resources in the description, and if you'd like me to keep you updated about climate news, hit like and subscribe below. Or to sound more like a big-time California influencer, smash that like and subscribe button and sound off in the comments, bruh. Ugh, that didn't feel good.